Okay. I think we can start. So, good morning. Good morning to all the participants. Welcome to this second day of the 3 days webinar on agroforestry and the green architecture of the new CAP. I'm Giovanna Seddaio. I'm Associate Professor of Agronomy and Crop Science at the Department of Agriculture of the University of Sassari. And I'm here also representing the research, the certification center of the same university that since more than 20 years is researching on the agroecology of several agroecosystems, among which agroforestry systems are among the most important. And we are doing this within several scale projects, regional, national, European and extra-European projects. And among the extra-European, we are especially focused on African countries. So as you know, the webinar today is focused on existing agroforestry policies. And I'm really, really honored to open this event today. In fact, we have many experts on agroforestry policies coming from several European countries, from north to south. And also we have representatives of countries outside Europe. They will share with us their knowledge and they will highlight what has been done so far in terms of agroforestry policies, and they will promote a reflection on the lessons learned at country, European and extra-European level. I'm sure that you really enjoyed this webinar today. The webinar is structured into 2 sessions. During the first one, 4 talks will be given on the experiences implementing agroforestry policies in Northern European countries. Then, in the second session, other 4 talks will be focused on experiences in the south of Europe. And then we will have John Mansell from the Virginia Tech Blacksburg in USA, who will give a talk on experiences of agroforestry policies in North America. I really want to thank so much John Mansell because he will have to wake up very early this morning to join us. And then we should listen also Javed Razvi from the International Center for Research in Agroforestry based in India, but unfortunately he is not able to join us because of some unexpected personal issues. So I remind you that this webinar represents one of the pre-events towards the 5th European Agroforestry Conference that will be held from the 17th to the 19th of May next year in Nuoro. Hopefully it will be not an online conference, so we will hope to meet all together in Nuoro, in Sardinia, in Italy. Yesterday there was the opening ceremony of this webinar that was focused with a very strong Italian focus, and tomorrow the topic will be on the future agroforestry policies. I give now the floor to Maria Rosa Mosquera Lozada, who is professor at the Crop Production Department in the University of Santiago de Compostela in Spain, who will play the role of facilitator this morning for the following 3.5 hours until the end of the webinar that is expected around 12:30 a.m. So thank you very much, Maria Rosa, for be available to play this role, and please, I give you the floor. Maria Rosa, I think that your microphone is switched off.
Yeah, sorry. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Okay,
Maria
okay,
Rosa.
okay.
Thank you.
So, I was saying that, good morning, everybody. First of all, I would like to say a big thank you to the Italian team that organized this excellent and extraordinary event, and also to EURAF to support me to be here with all of you. In just a moment, where we are in the transition between the two CAPs, the CAP from the 2014-2020 to the next one, where we do hope that agroforestry will play a big role within the transition of the farms towards sustainability. As already Giovanna mentioned it, we will have from now 3.5 hours where we will be hearing the excellent presentations made at the first time by Mr. Tamas Sledak from the European Union, which is really one of the most important responsibles of the measure 8.2. And later on, we will hear about how this measure is implemented in the different ministries from the north of Europe and after the break from the south of Europe. We will also have some examples from outside of Europe, like the one linked to the Agroforestry Temperate Association that links Canada, United States and Mexico in the way to pursue agroforestry across North and Central America. And in the middle, we will have some comments, discussions, and questions that can be done to the panelists. And finally, we will try to draw some conclusions and recommendations coming on grasped from the really very bottom. We are now 9:16, and it's time for Mr. Tamas Sledak, who will speak a bit about the overview of progress implementing CAP forestry measures in the EU, with a special reference, of course, to the measure 8.2 agroforestry. Tamas, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Maria Rosa. Good morning for everybody. I'm Tamas Sledak. As you heard, I'm dealing with all the forestry measures in rural development programs, basically during the last more than 10 years. Concerning agroforestry, we should clarify that this measure has been introduced to the rural development programs in 2000, starting from 2007. So the previous programming period. One of the bases of the inclusion of this measure was there was a SAFE program, Silva Arable Agroforestry program, was a research program, and we included to the rural development regulation this measure, but at that time only the establishment of the new agroforestry system was supported, and finally it's happened that basically just a couple of member states use this measure, and as far as I remember, Hungary was the champion with around 3,000 hectare new agroforestry system creation. And under the current still running rural development programming period 2014 till 2020, and with some extra years now, we have these agroforestry measures with not only with the establishment of the new area, but also with the maintenance, necessary maintenance for maximum of 5 years. But before entering a little bit more details, you should know, or just refreshing, all the member states and regions, because we have altogether 118 rural development programs or framework programs for this current programming period. At the beginning, all programming bodies, authorities, ministries had to prepare a plan for the next 7 years, And during the implementation of this rural development plan, in practice, every year there was a possibility to modify, to amend these programs. So even if some program or countries or regions have programmed included these measures, for example, the agroforestry measures, during the implementation, it could happen that they deleted or introduced as a new measure. So this is why we can say that rural development programs are dynamic animals or dynamic things, because during the programming period, there are possibilities to amend the programs, introducing new measures or deleting. This is why we can say, if we just summarizing, at the beginning of the programming period, we expected that forestry measures, including agroforestry measures, will receive slightly more than 7 billion euros. But during the implementation, during the annual modification, when the management authorities realize that which measures are better implemented, which measures are not so well implemented, they modified it. So the originally planned measures, for example, for afforestation at the beginning, it was more than 600,000 hectare new afforestation with more than 2.2 billion euro. Now, after several years and several modifications, I can see in my table the actual plan. This is not the implementation still, but the plan. The plan is slightly more than 250,000 hectare new afforestation, and the similar is valid for agroforestry measures, because at the beginning it was planned more or less 80,000 hectare new agroforestry system with slightly more than 120 million euros, and after several years of implementation, the actual plan, based on 32 rural development programs from 8 countries, it is 60,000 hectare and slightly more than 65 million euro total public expenditure. So you can see that comparing with the originally planned target, there is a decrease. It is, I would say, normal, because at the very beginning, and this is also valid for all the forestry measures, member states and regions try to develop, to allow a broader or larger scale of implementation for every measures, and later during the implementation they say, and they have to use the EU funds efficiently, so they, and not to lose the so-called lose the money, they are continuously reallocate the money for those measures which are performing better. And concerning so these are the planning, and something about the implementation. The system of reporting about the implementation is the following: that by the end of June, every programming authority should reply to send the implementation report to the Commission from the previous year. And as you know very well, that this year is a very special year due to this COVID pandemic. So this year, this reporting is a little bit delaying. So in practice, I have no access still the implementation report data, which would reflect the situation at the end of 2019. But I have some information, so basically the report from 2018, but this is really old data, and based on this situation, which reflect the situation in 2018 December, I can say that the afforestation implementation was almost 70,000 hectares, which is 1/3 of the actually planned area. And concerning agroforestry, at the end of 2018, the plan was 82,000 hectares, and the reported implementation was 1,227 hectares, which is 1.5% of the planned area. So we can see that this is really limited implementation. And just some other implementation. So traditionally the prevention measures and restoration measures are really well implemented, and almost 1/3 of the area for prevention and restoration measures were implemented. And we have also a measure 8.5, in investment in resilience, climate change adaptation, and non-productive investment. This was almost 20% implementation at the end of 2018, and we should also take into consideration that the implementation of this rural development programming period started also late. So basically 2016 was the first real year when the programs were implemented, the measures were implemented. And what is very important, and thanks to you, the very active people in EURAF, and also in member states in Spain and in Portugal, and particularly in Andalusia, the Commission received many information push also, and good help to formulate, to amend during the programming period the legislation, the regulation. So this is why we, during this so-called omnibus regulation, the rural development regulation has been amended, particularly for us, the rural development regulation, the agroforestry measure has been improved. And this is very important because there was a general request to help the renewal and restoration of the existing old agroforestry area, and this is already included in the regulation. And I saw that some member states or regions already took this into account during the modification. So I expect that the implementation of this measure during these last years will a little bit improved, but I also see that due to the COVID situation, due to the very difficult economic situation, some programming authorities removed certain amount for from those measures, forestry measures, which are not performing well, and put to the economic recovery package. So I would say that this programming period is or was a really special one. During the programming period, we managed with our common work together with you to improve the legal framework. So, and this new improved legal framework will be reflected in the new CAP strategic plan regulation, but this CAP strategic plan regulation is still under discussion, this trilogue process, so between the Council, Parliament and the Commission, so there is still no final version, which will provide a more flexible frame to the next programming period, when the member states will have much more flexibility and also responsibility for the implementation. And hopefully that this new period will be better for agroforestry measures, because this is really important for the economy, environment, and from social point of view. I think the time is finished for the allocated time for me. So thank you very much for your attention, and hopefully for the next event in agroforestry, we will know a little bit more about the concrete framework and possibilities for agroforestry. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Thomas, for this excellent summary about what that's agroforestry, how has been implemented in the last period, and that is not already published and public. I just would like to ask the floor if there is any question, and I can see one in the chat who was made by someone that's anonymous, so I don't know who made the question, but the question is, given the very low percentage of implementation relative to what was planned, is an analysis being performed at EU level to better understand the reasons behind for that, and hence to tackle that in the new CAP? Do you have any answer for that, Thomas?
In 2017, so in the really early stage of the implementation, there was a study on the implementation of forestry measures under rural development. But as I mentioned, this study was conducted in 2017, so basically only after two years, slightly more than 2 years implementation, so the findings are a bit limited. But concerning agroforestry, I think one of the main hindering factors was the risk of eligibility, to losing the eligibility for direct payment, and also the fact that we were talking about only the establishment of new agroforestry areas. So at the beginning of the programming period, there was no possibility to renew or regenerate existing agroforestry system. But these are already better. And I would say that even if we have no implementation report yet, later it could be, and also the Rural Development Network usually preparing a report on the rural development measures. But we have really good connection with Agroforestry Association, and we are very well informed regularly. During the past years, we had a couple of very events and meetings and conferences, so we are really following and basically analyzing this situation, and I do hope that this new CAP strategic plan regulation will reflect this, because many aspects already improved in the proposal, and let's see what will be the final version.
Thank you very much, Tamas. Is there any other question from the floor? No? Okay. Then we will have Tamas until the end, so if there is any question for him, we can also do it during the joint discussion that we will have about the implementation of the CAP measure in 8.2 in the Northern Europe. We move forward to the next part of this session that will start with the Hungarian representative of the Agriculture Ministry, Attila Nagy, and later on I will introduce the representatives from Belgium and Ireland for this morning Northern Europe discussion. Attila, the floor is yours.
Good morning. Attila is unable to attend on this meeting, so I would like to present his presentation. Shall I share my screen? Okay, I think... Can you see it now? Right now as well. Okay, so my name is Viktor Nagy. I'm colleague of Mr. Attila Nagy. Due to unfortunate circumstances, he's unable to attend on this meeting, so I would like to present what is the situation of the agroforestry in Hungary. As you know, the agroforestry system, the establishment of agroforestry systems are supported from the Rural Development Program under the Measure 8. So here you can see a short introduction of our Rural Development Program. Like any other rural development programs in Europe, the Hungarian Rural Development Program is the same structure, has the same structure as in other parts of Europe. In Hungary, the Ministry of Agriculture is responsible to implement the Rural Development Program. Maybe in other member states there are different kind of ministries, but in Hungary, the Ministry of Agriculture is the managing authority. We have published our call for tenders from the end of 2015, and it's go on their way. Here you can see a graph about how the sources of the Rural Development Program are distributed in Hungary. It is important to see that the forestry and the environmental payments are paying basically a higher amount, but separated in different kind of places, like in the environmental climate measure and every other parts. If you go into details, in Hungary, for support for the forestry, you can see the following graph. In general, I can say that the supports for forestry measures are divided into two, because we supported investments like measures or call for tenders, and we supported environmental management like measures. As you can see, when we established the Rural Development Program and the forest measures, our main goal was to increase the forest areas, because in the National Forest Strategy there is an aim to make a higher forest coverage in the country. And of course, it was we paid higher attention to that. We want to support the forestry sector as higher as the agricultural sector. So both sectors have to be supported in Hungary, and the agroforestry supports are a very typical example where the forestry can meet with the agricultural practices, and we can support both in one measure. Here you can see a list of our call for tenders where we supported the forestry sector. Maybe it's a full list, and I think most of the member states in Europe published similar call for tenders. And you can see we supported afforestation, we supported conservation for forest genetic resources, we supported forest environmental payments, and of course, we supported the establishment of agri-forestry systems as well. And I would like to go more into details into the agri-forestry systems. As I mentioned earlier, we published our call for tenders from the end of 2015, but this call for tender was published on the 3rd of November in 2016, and the potential beneficiaries could submit their payment applications, and the call for tender was suspended on 16th of January 2019, but since this year, 16th of November, we reopened it for the beneficiaries to submit their application. The reason for the reopening of it was we increased the unit costs in this call for tender, so the beneficiaries could apply for higher amounts, for example, for the establishment, for the maintenance costs, and like that. So that is why a higher uptake appeared, and that is why we are expecting a higher uptake in the future as well. In Hungary, in the agroforestry systems call for tender, we supported different kind of activities. We supported different kind of target areas. For example, we supported the establishment of new agroforestry systems combined with arable land or various arable culture on the field. And of course, we supported the creating of new woody pasture near roads, for example, or near fields, or woody meadows combined with grassland management, where animal husbandry are done. Creating of new woodland is also very important support scheme in our call for tender. The aim was the field protection, for example, against erosion or deflation, and that is why we supported the farmers to create rows of trees or group of trees where they can prevent the negative effects of the erosion or deflation. And of course, we supported the establishment of new innovative agroforestry systems. It was supported under the European Innovation Partnership call for tender. So that part of call for tender was a tiny part where forestry measures could support it, and mainly the agroforestry was supported there. On the next slide, I would like to show you some special supported investments or activities. In the Hungarian agroforestry system call for tender, we supported different kind of additional activities in case of grazing, because the grazing in Hungary, it's a very long-lasting tradition. So there are kind of different special equipments where we have to be supported. On the left side, you can see a wing. It was meant to establish for protect the grazing animals against the wind, because the grazing animals don't like the wind. So we supported a covered wing in this agroforestry measure to protect the grazing animals against the bad effects of the wind. In the middle, you can see a typical drinking can. It was supported under this measure, and the grazing animals could drink from that. And on the right side, you can see a shadow. It's a typical landscape feature in Hungary. We call it Gémes kút. It's a well, actually, and its contribute to the beauty of the land, and of course, water can be get from it. In our call for tender, the potential beneficiaries was private agriculture and land users, and of course municipalities and their associations was supported. We gave non-refundable grant-based unit costs, and of course we supported the management of the established trees as well, up to 5 years. As I mentioned earlier, there are different kind of target areas what we were supporting. For example, we supported the establishment of woody pastures or woody meadows combined with grassland management, what I was mentioned earlier. And of course, for the beneficiaries, it was required to cover at least 0.3 hectares. And of course, if the beneficiary would like to establish a grassland, it was a requirement to use a seed mixture of at least 4 grass species. And in these 4 grass seeds, it was a requirement to use a legume seed. It's good for nitrogen. Of course, and in this call for tender, another target area was development of an agroforestry system combined with arable land and agriculture, and it could be done by planting forest trees and fruit trees as well. So it was up to the beneficiary what he would like to plant, but it was a requirement to use forest and fruit trees species as well. Of course, what I was mentioned earlier, the erosion, the protection against the erosion or deflation, it was always supported, and we supported the establishment of woodland, aiming field protection. You can see we put different kind of requirements, like at least 1 hectare shall be established in a continuous area of arable land or grassland, and in case of field protection, the continuous woodland planted on the agricultural land have to be at least 15 meters wide, but not more than 20 meters wide, and a strip of shrubs have to be at least 1 meters wide, formed on both sides of the area covered by trees. What I was mentioned earlier, forest trees and the fruit tree species could be supported. And there was a requirement, what we put in this call for tender, that there shall be minimum of 115 trees and the maximum of 2015 trees per hectare have to be establishment. And from this amount, a maximum of 75 fruit trees could be put in this agroforestry system. In our call for tender, we allocated about 1.81 billion Hungarian forints, and it was used. Also, we put more requirements in our call for tender. We described that only those reproductive materials can be used where their origin is proven by documentation. So we would like to ensure that only those 3 species could be used where their origin is legal and proven by documentations. And in case of fruit trees, because fruit trees also can be established in this agroforestry system, only the state-recognized varieties or varieties with an official description in the National Catalogue of Varieties shall be used.
Victor, just 1 minute left, please.
Okay. Here you can see the uptake from between the first part and and beginning of January. So you can see a higher hectare amount and a high number of applications. In numbers, you can see how much is supported, how much is the demand into this, what I was mentioned earlier. In Hungary, first time it was not so high demand. After we increased the unit cost and the demand was higher. Here I would like to shortly show you an example in Hungary. A beneficiary was applied for 3.63 hectares of agroforestry system combined with arable land. As you can see, he used white pear, humus leaves, and Tatar maple, Acer tataricum, and of course he used fruit species for this agroforestry system, where he used Bistrica plum and early Bistrica plum in this establishment. And you can see how much euros he get for this kind of activity, and a yearly revenue could be provided for the maintenance of his activities. And another example in Hungary, where he established the agroforestry system on an existing grassland with grazing. You can see he used the sessile oak and hornbeam, and in fruit species he chose the horse plum in his agroforestry system. And of course he get a yearly 354 euros for the maintenance activities. And that's it. Thank you for your attention, and hope these examples and the Hungarian situation was clear and good for you.
Thank you very much indeed, Victor, for this short presentation of one of the countries that most implemented the agroforestry measure. We move on now to the second country that implemented in a higher degree compared with other European Union countries the agroforestry measure, which is France. And well, the person that would speak about this would be Marion Castu from the Agriculture Chambers. Marion, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Maria Rosa. I will share my presentation with you.
You have 10 minutes for it, and I would appreciate
Yes.
if you can skip to this time. Thank you.
Okay. Is it okay? Everybody can see? Yes.
Yes.
So I'm Marion Cassu, and I work in the French Caribbean island in Guadeloupe, and I am a French delegate in EURAF with Claire Lemarié, and we've made this presentation to show you the implementation of Measure 8.2 in France. So I will talk to you first of the description of Measure 8.2 in France. In France, we decided the measure at a regional level. Each region has decided on the way in which it has implemented its measure. So each of the 27 regions of France have made variation of initial CAP measure, and all in Pillar 2. So I will present you 2 examples of measure of variation in France. So with the Centre-Val de Loire and Guadeloupe, because I work here and it's easier for me. You can see difference between these 2 regions. In Centre-Val de Loire, the measure is established for the establishment of agroforestry system, while in Guadeloupe is established for the establishment, but also the maintenance of the agroforestry systems. And you have some variation in eligibility criteria, eligible costs, and non-eligible costs. For example, in Centre-Val de Loire, only one agroforestry is eligible, and also it's the same for different regions in France. It's intraplot agroforestry. While in Guadeloupe, you have both agroforestry that are eligible. It's when you planting forestry in a crop, or when you bring cultivation in the forest. So you can see there is a lot of difference, and it's the variation are very, very consequent between the region. For example, in eligible costs in Sainte-Val-de-Loire, you have implementation costs and study. Or in Guadeloupe, you can invest in small equipment too to implement the agroforest system. And in Guadeloupe, you have also a maintenance premium per hectare. The agriculture, when they invest in agroforestry, they have a small amount per year, per hectare, to develop the system. And I think it's not implemented in other regions in France, but we have just this premium just in Guadeloupe. The variation per region, I will talk to you in the next slide. Yes, in this slide you can see there is only 15 on 27 regions who has implemented agroforestry measure 8.2. And certain region has implemented the measure, opened the measure, but not implemented. Why? I will discuss it in the next slide. This slide, because all European funding must be completed by national funding, and sometimes it's not possible, or the region doesn't want to do that. On this table, you can see the initial planned amount by region. When S is noted, it's we have no data. The data have been relayed to us with by the Rural Development Observatory. It's a resource center responsible for collecting and making available data for the purpose of providing technical assistance to the authority managing rural development policy, CAP. You can see there is a lot of difference of the initial planned amounts between regions. Now we will talk to you about the initial planned payment versus engaged payment. On the total, approximately 9 million euros were planned, and only approximately 2 million euros were engaged. So it represents only 20% of case. And on 325 files engaged, only 183 files were paid. So it represents only 55% of cases were paid. And on this file, for the amounts, it's approximately 600,000. It represents 600,000 euros. So, and only 300,000 euros were paid. So it represents only 47% of the national envelope used. And through the European envelope, it's only 42% of the envelope, so 1 million euro engaged and 500,000 euro approximately paid. And for the total amount, it's only 44%, so 2 million euro engaged and 500,000 euro paid. So why is this difference? To make a quick assessment, the measure has not been in great demand in certain regions because some regions have used it more than others due to specificity who better suits to the territory. So some regions have written the measure better than others. And with Claire, we made a meeting three weeks later, we reunited all the person who work on the measure 8.2 to ask them why this measure 8.2 have been low paid or engaged. So I will talk to you now the measure 8.2 in practice and some breaks and proposition the network do. So there is the first.
Marian, 2 minutes.
Okay, the first are financial breaks, because between the moment of commitment and the moment when the money arrives in the account, the time is very, very long. The farmers have great difficulty in assuming cash in the meantime. The system is not suitable to the target audience. People know that it's public money and there are rules, but it's too complicated at administration level for us, and it's too complicated for the farmer. The other breaks are technical, because the measure is, like I said before, is framed around the single tip of agroforestry, and many people wanted to be extended in the new CAP to include other types of agroforestry. And there is many constraints in the specification of plantation. For example, Claire says me that in her region, trees must be mixed with forest trees, but it's very complicated for the application technically. And many checkpoints that have no connection with the plantation have been made by the states, and farmers are no longer mobilized because they're afraid of the checkpoints. So to be quick, the network have do some proposition for the post-2020 CAP. First is to offer a single planting support measure for any type of agroforestry, but in this single measure, distinguish the type of agroforestry and do that easier to apprehend. And to create a support measure to support spontaneous vegetation, which is not the case right now. You can also favor local source species, but also species adapt to climate change, which is not the case right now. You can also open the possibility of submitting a single file for implementation over several years, or it's the principal proposition is the reimbursement system also is linked to Europe requirements. It's very complicated to implement on a daily basis with farmer. So the network demands a favor lump sum financing rather than an estimate, because it's too restrictive now and it's too complicated. Yes, to have further information, if you want to go further, there is another measure with agroforestry in France. It's 4.4. It's specific to the age, but it's like 8.2. It's not open in every region in France. There is two French associations, if you want more information. It's AFAF, French Association of Agroforestry, and Réunir AF, so Réseau National pour l'Agroforesterie, National Network for Agroforestry. You can contact the two associations to internet, and they've made a lot of file with proposition for the next CAP. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Marion, for your excellent presentation and the detailed explanations about how agroforestry can be moved forward within the next period. I'm sure that the European Commission will take care of your recommendations. We move now to the next speaker, who is Tim Gisels from Belgium. Tim, you have 10 minutes, please.
Thank you, Maria Rosa. Hello, everybody. Ciao a tutti. My name is Tim, and I will speak a bit more about the agroforestry measure in Flanders, Belgium. A bit about our organization, the Department of Agriculture and Fisheries. The policy and implementation of the agroforestry measure is located in the Income Support Division, which together with the Entrepreneurship and Development Division is the Flemish paying agency. When we started with agroforestry, we had two types of agroforestry in mind: this typical alley cropping system or a silvopastoral system. It all started early 2010 when we started designing this new measure, which was based on the alley cropping system. Then in 2011, we started with the first implementation through the RDP, and we had a maximum of 70% of the investment cost that we could subsidize, which included the cost of the trees, the protection material against cattle or game, and the labor costs for planting and installing this material. There was a minimum of 50 trees per hectare and a maximum of 200. And the trees should be planted in rows. And a minimum of 1 hectare for the agricultural parcel. The trees have to be on the parcel for 15 years before they could be harvested. This resulted in 17 farmers and 38 hectares of agroforestry in Flanders. In this RDP, we came against some obstacles, legal obstacles due to interfering legislation, example given on a forestry legislation for planting of the trees on agricultural land, or harvesting in between, or felling of the planted trees at the end. There was also a bit of a lack of knowledge at the farmers level and lack of scientific evidence for the economic value of agroforestry. So, to solve these legal problems, it's a work in progress. And the scientific research projects that we also support for agroforestry Vlaanderen, we had the first one that ended last year to reach a breakthrough of feasible, profitable, and effective agroforestry systems in Flanders. And now we also support the next one, which aims to increase the applicability of agroforestry within Flanders. For the current RDP, the conditions remained largely the same, except we lowered the minimum amount of trees per hectare to 30 trees. There was no obligation to plant in rows anymore. There was, when the farmer would plant the trees himself, there was a fixed planting cost per hectare. and the trees must remain for 10 years instead of the 15 in the previous RDP. When we have a look at some data from 2012 until now, you can see at the right axis the area, and the left axis you can see the number of farmers, both for the commitment request and the actual payment requests, those farmers who planted an agroforestry system. So you can see the number of farmers who are interested is growing quite linearly, but the area that is planted is not growing that fast year by year. So we see a more linear appearance here, and we would love to see that turning into an exponential growth. Maybe in the next CAP. So we have some ideas about expanding the eligibility of agroforestry parcels, which is now limited to 100 trees per hectare in Belgium, in Flanders, and some ideas on a maintenance subsidy. A lot of challenges still remain, the remaining legal issues, how to make a revenue out of agroforestry, what is looked into in the project of Agroforestry Vlaanderen, which I mentioned before, and how should we deal with upcoming, and maybe the brackets should be around new types of agroforestry like food forests or permacultural systems. So that's my concluding slide. So I'll give back the word to Maria Rosa.
Thank you very much, Tim, for this excellent presentation and to show how slowly, but the number of hectares implemented and the number of farmers that are aware of agroforestry is increasing also in Flanders in Belgium. Our next speaker would be from Ireland, would be Eugene Curran. Eugene, the floor is yours.
You. Just looking at oh, here we are. There we are. Hello, I'm Eugene Curran. I work for the Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine. And 10 years ago, we decided to look at agroforestry as a possible way of introducing more trees to farms. So just to give you an idea of what Ireland is composed of, just briefly, there are two jurisdictions. The north of Ireland in pink is in the UK, and the south of Ireland in the Republic of Ireland as its head offices in the dark green area. So two jurisdictions. So in the Republic of Ireland, the funding is coming from the Exchequer, not from Pillar 2, Measure 8.2. The money for CAP was mainly directed towards GLOS and other environmental schemes. So agroforestry is part of our afforestation programme. And primarily, as I said, it was to see ways of exploring getting more trees into farms. So we started our journey at the beginning. We basically went up to the north of Ireland, and we looked at some trials that were set up by Jim McAdam in the north of Ireland in Loughgall. And as you can see, at 8 years old and 16 and 19 years old, the trees plantations were very, very, very impressive. So we decided to, and this is it, when we inspected it, and I brought a couple of colleagues of mine from the department to have a look, and we were both very impressed, and there was, we felt it was something that could work, and it was a silvopastoral system. So we set up a couple of trial demonstration plots with Shropshire sheep without protection but bigger plants put in. We set up a trial with tree guards, 5 metre spacing, and silage was cut by the farmer, and you had sheep grazing in between. Shropshire sheep and Polonia didn't really work out, and there was a small silvo-arable demonstration plot set up, and it was partially successful. But the silvo-pastoral system seemed to work quite well and seemed to be easy. So the advantages of having it under the afforestation program is that the trees are protected under the 2014 Forestry Act. They're also counted as offsetting carbon emissions, and landowners have access to silvicultural expertise, which I'll explain further in a minute. Farmers are in receipt of generous planting grants and premiums and are eligible for basic payments. The downside is land is now considered forestry land and cannot be cleared. Farmers may not be eligible for some other agricultural schemes, and this puts off many farmers because they feel if they're organic farmers, they won't get other payments. Farmers are wary of the reclassification of their land and what that might mean going into the future. So what we have are 12 different grant and premium classes, and just an example, the lowest one is grant and premium class 1, and it is the lowest amount of grant aid, and the premium lasts for 15 years. Now, to contrast that with grant and premium forestry grant, it's far more substantial, and that covers basically the establishment of larger plants, planting them into a bigger hole, 2 stakes, the shelter, and laying it out. And they also get a premium of 645 euros for 5 years. A 5-year premium, because it is, when farmers compare to the 15-year premium, is a bit of a stumbling block, but that has been reviewed. Just an example of an application coming in under our scheme. You could have, let's say in this example, about 9 plots, but 2 of those might only be agroforestry. So it's flexible, and the farmer has an option of putting in various different types of trees in different ways on his farm, and this is what we're trying to do. Now, this is a very important example because there's no point in launching a scheme and expecting it to take off. You've got to promote it. You've got to produce leaflets and brochures, have demonstration days, and have articles and papers, and get as much media behind it as possible. But in this particular photograph, it's interesting because at the far side, you have administrative staff from the department busy taking notes there and listening to the landowner expressing what he found worked and what he found didn't work. Also, you have technical people there, like myself. My colleagues are there, and they're listening to see what the landowner, what his issues are. Also, you've got people there from the Agriculture Food Development Authority, also known as Teagasc, and they're responsible for research and training, and they're seeing what the landowners' needs are. And you've got companies in here as well who actually sell the schemes because they're looking for business, and they're wanting to go to farmers and say, look, there are these different options for planting, and if they're worried about agroforestry being too complicated, they won't mention it, and as a result, it is an opportunity missed. And last but not least, there are landowners here, and the guy nearest the camera is a farmer, and he actually planted his land shortly after this demonstration, with agroforestry. Okay, we got the minister out, and the ministers tend to come and go, and they're great for, you know, promotion and support and so on, but we already have a new minister. So my feeling is that the administrative staff in the department and technical staff tend to be more of a permanent structure, and they are very, very important to get out into field days. Some of the schemes in action, we currently have about 51 farmers in our scheme, and this is roughly around 140 hectares at various different stages of approval. We have sheep and uplands, poultry farms, sheep and silage, and a pig farmer. That was the guy who was nearest the camera in the previous picture, and he was going to set out paddocks for pigs to offset siltation and to give them shelter, and also introduce poultry as well. So really, there's a lot more work to do. We need to look at the companies, and because they sell the scheme, we got to make sure that they're comfortable with what we're offering. And farmers, to show them that the flexibility and to meet other farmers who've gone in and planted before. Try and secure the single farm payments for farmers, and also to ensure that the trees are protected. It's very, very important. After a 5-year environmental agricultural system, sometimes the trees won't have the same protection that they would have under forestry. This is something we need to look at. Research, teagasc and universities are increasingly coming on board with agroforestry, and there is situations where we have, for example, existing plantations, but like, what animals do you put in? How long are they left in the plantation, and how many do you leave in, and what tree species are best suited? Are there some that need to be avoided? These are the kind of questions that we face as we're going forward. So in the last year, a very, very good development for agroforestry in that we have a new government, and they published a programme for government, and it mentioned in 2 bits, they were very promising. It's stated to develop a new strategy to expand afforestation, particularly close to nature forestry and agroforestry. And also it said, provide increased support for the development of agroforestry, silvopasture on Irish farmlands. Now, this was the first time it was really laid out in black and white for agroforestry. So things are looking very positive at the moment. Also, on another positive note, the Irish Agroforestry Forum was set up, and this is going to be It was set up in 2020 and it's still in development. There are approximately 12 members at the moment, including department officials, teagasc, the Queen's University Belfast, and organic and non-organic farmers and groups. And so this will be a dissemination hub for agroforestry in the island of Ireland. So it'd be the entire island of Ireland. And it will help farmers who have drawn down grant aid and those who haven't. So it's an all-embracing group. And they submitted a document to the Department of Agriculture, and basically it was saying that there should be agriculture, forestry, and possibly a pro-rata approach, which I'll mention in a minute. It's interesting also to note in Northern Ireland, they didn't use Measure 8.2 either. They went from one of the environmental farming schemes, and they have approximately 50 farmers and approximately 80 hectares, and they've approached it as an agricultural measure. So what's the future? Well, we've basically, I suppose, come to the conclusion here is that it doesn't have to be agriculture or forestry. It can be in both and use whatever opportunities are available. Currently, we will continue, and this is what the Irish Agroforestry Forum suggested, that we continue and expand the forestry agroforestry measure. And the department have already shown a strong interest in doing this. And this is primarily targeted areas where more than 400 trees per hectare are planted so that silvicultural input can be applied. Where there are less than 400 trees per hectare, it could be a parkland situation where you might only have 10 trees per hectare. So its silvicultural input isn't as important. So there could be agroforestry measures introduced into the agricultural side of the house. And then finally, there'd be the last it would be a halfway house where you could have areas of forestry land planted and the trees protected, and then the areas in between agricultural land. So the land in between would be eligible for other agricultural payments, and the areas that are planted under afforestation, those trees would be protected. This is something we're looking at as well. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Eugene, for this excellent presentation. We have time now at around, we were 10 minutes late, but we started 10 minutes late, so I think we are on time. Thank you very much all the panelists for being able to be on time and allow us to have for sure, an excellent discussion just right now. I have just wrote in the chat and the Q&A questionnaire that people can make questions there, and we have several of them. People have been quite active due to the interest that is coming from this event and the talks of our presenters. Well, I will move on because if you don't mind, I will move on with the questions that are in question and it will end with the chat questions. Some of them are already answered. The first one is about the table of Thomas. I guess Thomas would be able to send to the organizers of this event the tables and the small this presentation that he gave this morning. Is that correct, Thomas? Could it be possible?
Sorry. Actually, I had no time to prepare a presentation, as you know, and basically these are not new data. I mean, for particularly concerning the implementation. So okay. I'm still waiting for, because that would be very interesting, what is the implementation. So I think at the very earliest January will be the situation when I will be able to work with the implementation data. Okay, we will wait and look forward for this information. And I just put information that under rural development programs, information action measure 1, also there's a possibility to support field visit and information exchange. And I think that is very important. And the uptake of the agroforestry measures will improve when the farmers will be able to see on the field, not only on presentation. So this is why this cooperation and information actions presented, for example, in this Irish case, is absolutely important. Thank you. Yeah, and the key role that the EAP Agri has developed from the Commission with the agroforestry focus group and the different operational groups that are running across Europe. There is a question from an anonymous. It's in the case of cultivation for Marion. In the case of cultivation installations in the forest, does that not lead to a risk of forest degradation, or how is that controlled for? Marion made an answer there, but maybe it's better to hear her directly.
Yes. I respond that everything is controlled. The density per hectare of plants is subject every time to regulation. And I made an example in Guadeloupe. We only cultivate under forest, and the density per hectare is very controlled. We have specification, and it's the most restrictive specification in France because everything is controlled. What you bring in the forest, what you to the soil, etc., etc.
Yeah, thank you, Marion. Christian Duprat make a question about, those areas of France that promotes agroforestry that are not linked to the rural development programs. I don't know if Christian want to make a more extensive this question, or Mario to answer, to share with all of us the answer.
Yes, it's a very interesting question, and I don't know that Occitanie also supports the establishment of IF system, which is very interesting. And I say to Christian that I'm gonna return. I'm gonna interesting to that later, and sorry to show if other regions do the same. I don't know actually. So Christian is here. Okay.
Yeah.
A very short comment, if you can hear me.
Yes, please.
Yes, the Occitanie region has decided to do it without the help of Europe because it was much simpler. And because the projects are small, the amount of money is low, and it's a lot of red tape to do that with European money. So they decided to do it themselves with only regional money, and it works well.
Yeah, from let's say from outside point of view, when we hear all and when we read all the rural development programs, how the measure 8.2 is implemented, we only see, agroforestry is in the middle between agriculture and forestry. So most of the restrictions, there are many restrictions that try to fit this measure in this use of land in between. So there are restrictions with the age of the tree, the number of trees, and maybe this makes, at least for farmers, complicated to understand this measure. A report that we made showed that the most used measure to support agroforestry is the agri-environmental measure, the previous 214, the current 10.1. Maybe because it's more based on what are the results, what is it for, and all. Yeah, and it highlights all the benefits that agroforestry can provide. There is also a question from Matila to Tim. Matila asked, how did you solve the legal issues in Flanders? Did farmers have to reject subsidies, or what did happen? Tim, to extend your answer?
Yeah, the legal issues mainly hold back farmers from implementing agroforestry systems. And then it's mainly about if they could harvest the trees at the end of the life cycle, and will they need a permit or not? And that's a legal issue that hold backs a farmer from implementing agroforestry. So there is some legislation that we already excluded the harvesting of an agroforestry tree from a permit, but there's still other legislation which will need permits.
Oh, thank you very much, Tim. Alberto Mantino did a longer question to Tamas. Alberto, do you want to take the floor? I make it shorter. No? Well, maybe I can make the question. Since this is an agroforestry measure, not fruit orchard establishment, the maximum number of fruit trees should be less than 50%. In particular, I guess, about what?
Yeah, I replied in the chat. So basically, this agroforestry measure is under the forestry measure group. So basically, the intention was to mix forest trees with agricultural use. But during the programming and the preparation of the regulation and the measure, it was clear that several countries or regions want to mix also fruit trees. Yeah. So we agreed and discussed, and also try to ensure not to enter to other field, agricultural field. to orchard, so fruit production, because that is a very different issue, the orchard and fruit production. So this is why we had this interpretation and guideline that more than 50% of the planted trees should be forestry species. And also among forestry species, there are some fruit trees. To be simple, how to say, or easy. And we, for example, in case of Hungary, even under the previous programming period, the ancient varieties of fruit trees were supported. So really to bring back the old varieties and valuable ecologically and genetically important varieties back to the land. This was important. But under the current legal system, we should stick to this rule that at least more than 50% of the planted trees should be forest tree species to be classified as agroforestry, not mixed orchard with agricultural use. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Thomas. And I guess it's more complicated when we have trees that has a double purpose, like for example, chestnut, because they can be used for timber production, and at the same time they produce a very valuable fruit, which is a chestnut anyway. Mm-hmm.
And we also supporting the multi-purpose.
That's very important. Bert made a question to Marion. In the case of cultivation installations in the forest, does that not lead to a risk of forest degradation, or how is that controlled for? Marion?
Yes, I don't see the question. What question are you talking about? I don't see the question.
It says from Bert Robins, it's in the chat, the minute is 10:04, and the question is, in the case of cultivation installations in the forest, does that not lead to a risk of forest degradation, or how is that controlled for? Sorry.
Yes, I respond to that everything is controlled. I saw that, I told that earlier, that everything is subject to regulation, and there is a specific control and very controlled specification. There is you can, of course, there is a risk of forest degradation when you cultivate under a forest, but you can control it to minimize the degradation. So that's why, yes.
Thank you very much, Marion. There is also now a long question from Patrick Worms. Patrick, it's better if you explain yourself and make it shorter. And the question is for Thomas. Patrick?
Sorry, I had some connection issue. Could you repeat this question?
Yeah, it's a question from Patrick Worms. It's a long question, so maybe he wants to summarize it for you. And the question is for you, Thomas. Patrick, are you there?
I think Thomas already replied in the chat, but I'll happily copy it here. It looks from the interventions that we've had from the various speakers that we have two major issues with the uptake of agroforestry. First, there is the administrative complexity of applying for subsidies, and second is the very rigorous legal definition of what you are and are not allowed to do. And that, in my understanding, is very much a tenure issue. In fact, you do not have tenure of your trees. You're not master of the fate of your trees. If you get it wrong, if you take the wrong species, you plant them wrong, you have the wrong density, whatever, you risk losing your subsidies. The question to Tamas was, we know this is the case from the current iteration of the Common Agricultural Policy. We are now developing a new iteration of the Common Agricultural Policy. Is there a snowball's hope in hell that in the new trilogue, the Commission, the Parliament and the Council would agree to put in place a general rule that would get away most of these technical, regulatory, and subsidy barriers? Or is that a forlorn hope? And if it is a forlorn hope, and we have to go to the individual member states in order to get them to integrate this in their strategic plans, should we not all commit suicide straight away? Because convincing 27 member states is a lot harder than convincing a single European institution.
Yeah, but I understood your question. The situation is that the Commission has chosen to have a new delivery model. It means to give more flexibility to member states, because this was a very strong request that member states wanted to have the freedom for more flexibility. And it means also some responsibility for the implementation and preparation of this CAP strategic plan. But in theory and hopefully in the reality, after this trialogue process, when the three institutions will agree on the final text, and based on the proposals, it seems that the new period, the new CAP period, programming period, will bring a much more flexible framework for agroforestry. So it is really up to the member states, or the Commission intention was, okay, to give more flexibility. But during the discussion, we saw that the countries, the member states, wanted to get more details. But if the Commission give more details, it also automatically, or not automatically, but practically means more potential restrictions. So sometimes we are not ready to accept the flexibility. So this is why still this process is very interesting. And when the CAP strategic plan regulation will be finalized, and this does not mean the end of this common thinking and working process, because after there will be the phase of the preparation of the CAP strategic plan, there will be more and more questions and reply and iterative process. But please know, the omnibus regulation is already made agroforestry measures much more flexible. Thanks to you, your very hard work in as an association and in several member states, as I mentioned. So we already have better situation at this moment, and I'm pretty sure that in the future this will be even better.
Yeah, that flexibility from omnibus was really needed, and we do hope that with the CAP strategic plans, the new activities will be better adapted to the different environment and climate challenges of the countries, and instead of being based on restrictions to implement agroforestry, we will hope to see how agroforestry benefits the environment and get based paid results. There is now a question from Jerry Lawson. It's for Tim. Can you give more details on the legal challenges? Does the land become forest if there are too many trees per hectares? Please, Tim.
Yes, I answered Gary in the chat. Actually, that would be a different presentation, what would take me about 1 hour. But the discussion arose whether agroforestry was seen as a forest or not in different legislations. And the number of 200 was indeed important in that discussion. And there's a wide range of legislation. There's the forest legislation, legislation on nature, changing of habitats or small woody elements, spatial planning, a very old legislation on planting trees and forest on agricultural land, and some legislation on heritage that all had influence on whether or not you could implement or establish the agroforestry system and be sure that you could harvest a tree when you want in the future. And that's still a work in progress, as I mentioned in my presentation, but we do step by step, and actually it's pretty looking good with the department that's on nature and forest legislation. We have a good understanding, so we feel that in the future we would make quick progress.
Yeah, thank you very much, Tim, for the answers. I think we are having a very good and exciting discussion, but I think I have to cut it here of the timing. We are 10 minutes late. So I'm sorry, because there are very good questions, and the next one was very, very large because it is for all panelists. I do hope they are answered in the chat. We will take care of the questions, and we will take care of the answers, and we'll try to collate all the information in the final conclusions and recommendations. And if you get the opportunity for the next joint discussion, that can be also be included. So thank you very much. It's 10:45, so we have to have 15 minutes of break, or maybe we can start again to 5 to 11. Is that okay for all of you?
Okay.
So I guess
yes,
yes.
Maria Rosa. Yes, I think that we agreed with the organizers to use 15 minutes. So
Okay.
break.
So
we can start at 11 o'clock. Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much, Giovanna. So we have 5 extra minutes, and enjoy your coffee. Thank you.
Bye. See you later. Welcome to all of you who have just connected. We are about to start the second session of this webinar today. The first part was really very interesting and was mainly focused on the experiences implementing agroforestry policies in North European countries. Then we are starting now the second session on existing agroforestry policies that will be focused on experiences from southern European countries, mainly Italy, Spain, Portugal, and Greece. And then we will have our colleague from USA who will provide. Will share his experience on North America. So the facilitator now is Joana Amaral Paulo from the Center for Forestry Studies in the University of Lisbon in Portugal. I wish to thank very much Maria Rosa Mosquera Lozada, who was the facilitator of the first session. And then I give the floor to Joanna. Thank you.
Thanks to you.
Hello, good morning to you all. First of all, thank you for the invitation to moderate this session that follows on what we already heard in session one. So I would just like to ask you to write your questions on the questions and answer option that you have using Zoom. But let's just wait until the end of all of the 5 presentations in order then to answer them during the discussion period. And I would also like to ask the presenters to keep on with their 10 minutes schedule on the program. So we will start now with the presentation from Italy, from Giustino Mesaliera, from the Italian Agroforestry Association.
Thank you, Joanna. Ciao to everybody from Italy. Now I share my screen. Okay. Okay. In my 10 minutes, I will present you the situation of Italy, that, as you know, is a very complex country with a different environment from north, that is a part of we can say Central Europe, with alpine mountains, with a lot of water, and the southern part of the country that is in the middle of a Mediterranean Sea. To do this, we decided, as organizer of this event, to select 2 regions. The first one is the Veneto region, and that is the region where I work in the local agency for the development of agriculture. And then we will see the situation of the southern region from Puglia. So very quickly, starting from Veneto region, here you can see where is in the northern landscape of our country. We have a big plain in the central southern part of the region, and then a very important alpine part in the northern part of the region. And we have a very long tradition with agroforestry. Until the 60s, we could, going through the country, you could have seen agroforestry system everywhere. In the plain, with the traditional system that we call piantata padana, it is an alley cropping silvoarable system based in the past on mulberry cultivation for silkworm industry. In the alpine area, we have traditional silvopastoral systems that we call malghe, where the animals graze not only the pasture, but the forest too. And very often we have open forests like the one you are looking at in this picture, with large spruce as dominant trees in this land. As all over Europe in the last 50 years, this traditional landscape have been largely substituted with intensive crop in the plain and with the spread of forest in the mountains. So in both the cases, there was a strong reduction of the agroforestry system in this part of the country. In other regions, for example, in Sardinia, survived traditional silvopastoral system, but in the Veneto region, there was a very deep reduction. But during the last decades, there was many forces trying to reintroduce, relaunch agroforestry activity. And in my region, this was mainly the local extension agency, Veneto Agricoltura, and the National Italian Agroforestry Association that was born some years ago in this region. The picture shows two modern agroforestry landscape. In both the case, we have a poplar planted in lines. In the upper part, you can see one of the pilot farm of Veneto Agricoltura, and in the lower part, you can see one of the more visionary farm that we have in our region, Casaria Farm, that I wanted to underline. This farm is the headquarters of our association. So we are directly in the field working with the farmer. Because of this activity, many agricultural features reappeared. For example, hedges, for example, buffer strips, and the regional RDP helped really in a very effective way the diffusion of hedges, of buffer strips in our region during the last two programming period. Speaking about specifically 8.2 measure, Veneto region was the only region that in the 2007-2013 programming period used this measure. There was a significant amount of money, more or less 2 million euros have been allocated, but unfortunately only a very small percentage of this money have been really used to build a new silvo-arable and silvopastoral system, only the 1.4% of the total amount. In the present programming period, Veneto region has activated measure 8.2. Only 5 regions in Italy, 5 of 20 different regions and autonomous provinces have activated this measure. Veneto try again, but the results are more or less the same, because only a small percentage, very, very small percentage of these resources have been used for making real agroforestry, modern agroforestry system. It's interesting to underline that we had one operating group that used a small percentage of these resources, but I have to underline that in any case, farmers taking part in the operating group prefer other measure, because we have heard from other European countries, we have different measure that give grants for planting trees. So we can build up a new agroforestry landscape using not the 8.2 measure, but other measure. And very often these measures are more interesting for the farmer because they are more simple, they know everything, they are traditional in the landscape more than what have been proposed with the 8.2 measure. So which are the reasons for this failure? Because as I wanted to underline, we have been able to give a new opportunity for agroforestry in general, but we have not been until now able to make effective this special measure that, as we know, is very important because don't reduce the grant coming from the first pillar for the farmer. We, as a other speaker have just underlined, have identified two reasons for this failure. First one is limitation imposed by regulation and by tenders, because the tenders that the region open must respect what the regulation say. So we have, for example, limits in the use of poplar and other shorter rotation species that are very appreciated from our farmer, but we have the limits. We have just seen the item of fruit trees. 8.2 is a forest measure, and so there are limits in using fruit trees that could be very interesting for some organic farm in many areas of our region. And then there is a coldness of the rural world. The farmers very often are not warm looking at agroforestry measure because there is a lot of work to do and about the technical aspect. There is a lack of knowledge between the farmer, and first of all, there is a prejudice about negative interaction between trees and crops. And this is a very long-term prejudice that is not easy to cancel. Clearly, there is evidence. There are a lot of data coming from research, but farmers very often don't read the peer review, and they look at what they see in the farm and what the ancients say about the interaction between trees and crops. But in the end of my speech, we have a lot of reason for hope looking at the future because the most important stakeholders are moving towards agroforestry in our region. There is a growing interest of poplar grower for linear poplar cultivation. University in our region and research center started a different research activity, and very relevant for me, in 2020, the University of Padua launched a new curriculum on agroforestry system with the master degree in forestry science. And as you can see from this photo, our students like agroforestry very, very appreciate the shadow during our warm summer. So I thank you for your attention. I wanted to thank the colleague and the friends that give me suggestions, data, images, and comments to prepare this presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Giustino, for this very nice presentation, ending with a very nice photo from students from University of Padua. We will now follow for Domenica Campanile. I'm sorry if I am not saying your name in the best way. That's the head of the section Sustainable Management of Protected Forests and Natural Resources from Italy. Hello, Domenico. Can you unmute your mic, please? We are not hearing you because your mic is muted.
Ecco qui. Ci siamo, ci siamo.
Perfect.
Buongiorno a tutti.
Hello, good morning.
Grazie.
Here we are. Thank you. Thanks for inviting me. My presentation will talk about the implementation of Measure 8.2 in Puglia, following two calls for tenders that brought unexpected results as regards our region. And in my presentation, you'll see the results and why I call them unexpected. First of all, I'd like to tell you that we are an Italian region that's poor in terms of trees and surface covered. Our surface is about 189,000 hectares, and it has a coefficient of tree coverage of 9.7%. So the regional government have to pay attention to these data in order to increase it and make it more attractive at a national level. In this slide, and from this graph, you can understand how our region has the lowest coverage of tree. You can see that Apulia is at first place, while this graph becomes light brown to show the surface dedicated to agriculture. And agriculture, in terms of area covered, is 75% vis-a-vis the territorial area. So we're talking about a region which is mainly agricultural. And as regards the division of crops, we have 45% of trees. But another important percentage regards grass, which is 35% of the surface covered. So in the programming, we took into consideration this 35% because we're talking about grass crops, mainly wheat. So diversification with the introduction of forests seemed important.
I am sorry, may I ask you to switch to the presentation mode in order for us to see your slides larger?
Devo ampliare la presentazione. Così?
Perfetto.
Ok.
Grazie.
Scusa. E quindi questa è un po'...
So this is the map of our region of Puglia, where you can see light green that shows the hill coverage, the hill area, and the forests are mainly in the Gargano, in the top part of Puglia, and then the central part, which is the Murgia. In these areas, which are pretty large, there are two national parks, the Gargano National Park and the Alta Murgia National Park. As I was saying, we are talking about forestry, but also agroforestry. In our rural development program, apart from Measure 8.1 that gives funds for afforestation, We've also activated the measure 8.2, that is establishment and maintenance of agroforestry systems. While in the measure 8.1, we've allocated 20 million euro. We've allocated 5 million euro for measure 8.2. And this measure, agroforestry systems, aims at introducing forest species in arable areas. What type of trees have we established? What type of establishment have we established? Following EU regulations, we only used those regulations, and so we decided to use line hedges and shelter types, but also trees in these arable lands, using some forest species between 50 to 250 trees per hectare, and using species which can have a double effect, that is producing both fruits and wood and timber. The important aspect we've taken care of was to draft some planning guidelines in order to give technical guidelines to technicians drafting these guidelines. So we've defined some simple models, for instance, single line shrubs or double line hedges and double line trees, and these are the types of interventions that we've included in our guidelines. We've also thought about established the plantation of
con una realizzazione arborea e
establishment of a strip trees in and 2 lines of shrubs. So together with hedges and trees, we've established the inclusion of little forests of groups of trees with the aim, with environmental aims and productive aims, because we all know that this way we would have increased and improved biodiversity, and we would have contributed to reducing soil erosion and soil pollution, and especially those soils with nitrogen problems. Another important aspect that we've taken care of is the one connected to the provision of plants to be used within the framework of Measure 8.2. These plants come almost exclusively from regional nurseries, and these nurseries, according to regional regulations, have to collect the seeds from these 6 regions of provenance. We have the Gargano in green, we have the Tavoliere area in yellow, the Monti Dauni in blue, and then the large central region in purple, which is Murgia from Taranto and Brindisi, and then we have the light blue area, and then the Salento region in red. Of course, we are talking of an area of Salento which is affected by Xylella fastidiosa, which is a pest, and we have to pay the highest attention because we have to avoid the other species entering that area in order not to worsen the Xylella crisis. As I was saying earlier, the measure foresaw the allocation of 5 million euro and is mainly for farmers and public actors and their consortia. The unexpected aspect I mentioned at the beginning was due to the fact that this measure, vis-à-vis the measure 8.1 that gives support for afforestation, this measure gives funds for 80%, covers 80% of expenditure, because the candidates had to cover for the remaining 20%. So the maximum contribution of 2,750 euro is only 80%, whereas for the maintenance of this plantation, our call foresaw support for 100%, not higher than 1,200 euro for 5 years. And these included general expenses for 12%. Two call for tenders have been drafted, one for 2017 and one for 2018. They achieved two different results because while the one in 2018 saw only 59 applications for 2,815,000 euro, the following call for tender, after drafting the guidelines and communicating better the usefulness of the measure, we saw an increase of applications. That is 264 applications and a demand that is 5 times higher than the allocation. That was 2 million euro. So the total demand was 10 million euro, and this is an important aspect. So in the end, among the 323 applications, 106 applications have been accepted, and more applications are being investigated to reach the 5 million euro allocated. We've already committed about 4 million and a half, and this will allow us to implant these forest species in 1,400 hectares for a total of 342,000 plants in total.
1 minute.
Ho concluso che questi interventi li andremo a realizzare.
And these interventions will be implemented. We had Nature 2000 areas, so these interventions will be implemented in these Nature 2000 areas. So these are my final considerations. Puglia has invested in the measure 8.2 that gave great results. This measure allows us to diversify the agriculture landscape, both from an environmental and landscape point of view. And these interventions will take place in Nature 2000 to improve the natural corridors. So the implementation of the measure will be taken into account in the next actions in agroforestry. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Domenico. So we are now moving from Italy and going to Spain we are going to hear the presentation of Jose Ramon Alvarez. Jose?
Ciao.
Hello. Good morning.
Good morning, ciao a tutti. Good morning.
Alvarez will speak from the Forestry
Going
Committee.
to share the screen?
Yes, if you can. From the Forestry Committee of the Andalusian Biodiversity Council from Spain. Welcome.
Welcome, thank you very much. Sorry, is it ready? Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So,
yes, okay.
Well, my name is Jose Ramon Guzmán Álvarez, and I work at the Regional Ministry of Agriculture, Livestock, Fisheries and Sustainable Development in Andalusia, one region on the south of Spain. And well, this presentation is made with support and information from EURAF Spain, and also with the colleagues from the Ministry of Agriculture of Spain and the regions that have implemented or programmed the 8.2 measure in their rural development program. I mean, Extremadura, Galicia, Asturias, and País Vasco or Euskadi. So the application of a European Agriculture Fund for Rural Development in Spain is coordinated by the Ministry of Agriculture, but managed on a decentralized basis by the administrative regions of the country. That's why we have 17 rural development regional programs and one national program in order to carry out the national strategic plan. The rural development programs that have included agroforestry aid has been Galicia on the north and Asturias and Basque Country, and also Extremadura and Andalusia. These administrative regions belong to different biogeographical regions. The first third, I mean Galicia, Asturias, and the Basque Country, belong to Atlantic biogeographical region, and Extremadura and Andalusia belong to Mediterranean region. And this means that the difference are mainly due to climatic features, and we can consider a wet Spain and a dry Spain, and which determine the kind of agroforestry system we can find throughout Spain. There is a sharp contrast between the agroforestry system in the northern part of Spain and the southern part of Spain. The application of in Spain of agroforestry measures have taken advantage of the flexibility of the measure. I mean, there have been the establishment of silvicultural systems and also the establishment of silvopastoral systems. In the first item, we have timber production forest trees with apple trees, strawberry or raspberry and other in Asturias, and also chestnut for fruit and timber, and moose road and other production in Galicia. And also we have been the establishment of silvopastoral systems as timber and grazing in Asturias and País Vasco, and also pasture and grazing in the Dehesa open forest agrosystem in Extremadura and Andalusia. The flexibility of the agroforestry measure is evident in the implementation of the measure. For instance, the density range from 10 to 120 trees per hectare in Andalusia to 50 to 450 trees per hectare in Asturias. For instance, the annual premium per hectare period to cover the cost of maintenance range between 2 years in Extremadura to 5 years in País Vasco or Asturias. And the investment include a wide range of activities as shrub clearing, planting, protecting of the seedlings, and fencing the plot when the establishment is through plantation, and clearing, planning, and fencing when the system is achieved through conversion of a previously afforested area. It's worth to mention the case of dehesa because being the main problem of the dehesa that it has been qualified as the most widespread agroforestry system in Europe, the regeneration of its very old trees, the Article 23rd initial focus on the establishment of the system was difficult to manage. Nevertheless, under this situation, the region of Extremadura reached to implement an aid based on this regulation in coordination with the aid from Article 17, investments. With the publication of the Omnibus regulation, this led to a more comprehensive definition of the measure, including regeneration and renovation. So, although the region of Andalusia initially followed the approach of Regulation 2013-1305, the updated versions of the rural development programs modified the measure, putting the focus in regeneration and renovation. And now we are with the implementation under development. What is our vision as a state and different regions about the agroforestry measure? First, we are concerned about the conservation of our varied representation of agroforestry systems and the importance of preserving their multifunctionality, especially in this context of climate change. Some of our agroforestry systems, as dehesas, have a long history and require protection due to their socioeconomic, ecological, and productive values. Nevertheless, their economic sustainability is under threat. The inclusion of a specific measure oriented to agroforestry system is a great opportunity for us. And what have we learned about this period of programming? First, that the Rural Development Program 2014-2020 has allowed a better understanding of the agroforestry measure in Spain, although its application has been uneven and its full potential has not been exploited. Among the issues that have been identified as obstacle is the lack of knowledge, resulting in lack of interest of the possible beneficiaries. The complexity of the administrative processing is another weakness, due, for instance, to the need of coordinate the investment part of the aid with the cost of maintenance, which comes under the integrated system of the CAP. And some farmers have the fear to lose the agricultural classification of its plot, and consequently, they fear to lose the eligibility for CAP. And in conclusions, these and other reasons partly explain that this measure has been considered with a lower degree of priority by the Spanish regions in the framework of rural development programs with large number of measures to be implemented. In any case, the lessons learned during the 2014-2020 period will probably allow a better application of the support to agroforestry systems in the next programming period and will show us how to foster its implementation. And gracias. And it's then your turn for doing question and to continue to discuss this issue. Thank you very much. Gracias. Gracias.
Thank you very much, Jose. Perfect timing and very interesting presentation. Happily, in a time where I see that some participants are now joining this webinar, so we have an increasing number of people attending it. So this is very, very happy for us and especially for the organizers. And now we are moving for my country, for Portugal, and we will be hearing the presentation of Manuel Loureiro, from Director of the Office of Planning, Policies and General Administration of Agriculture. Hello, good morning, Manuel.
Good morning, Joana. Obrigado. I'm gonna try. It's working? You can see the presentation? Okay. Good morning, everyone. I would like to start to thank the European Agroforestry Federation for the invitation to GPP Ministry of Agriculture to participate in this webinar. The presentation, wait, what's happened? Okay. The presentation consists in 4 brief parts: an introduction to explain the main agroforestry system in Portugal, the state of play of the measure 812 agroforestry systems of the 2020 Rural Development Program, and the other CAP support for this system, and the conclusion. The Montado cork, oak and holm oak plantation is undoubtedly the most important for agroforestry system in Portugal, representing 33% of the total forest area. According to data from the 6th National Forest Inventory, the main area of Montado is in south of Portugal, in south of Tagus River, but there are also considerable areas in East Century and in the northern areas of the country. Carob trees, chestnut trees, and stone pines are also very important. And from the data of the inventory, we have 104,000 hectares of stone pines with the density of less than 80 trees per hectare, and with this density also, carob trees 10,200 hectares and chestnut 27,100 hectares. This production system has existed in Iberian Peninsula for a very long time. In fact, and a curiosity, in Portugal, the first law we have to defend the cork tree is from the 13th century, whereas at the beginning of the 20th century, were about 366,000 of cork oaks. In 2010, were 737,000 hectares. And between 1987 and 2012, alone 147,000 new hectares were planted with public funding. It's important also to say these stands are 98% privately owned and just 2% state owned. The vast majority of the existing stands with these species, regardless of their initial establishment, and by creating sparse systems with a low percentage of land cover, which favor the traditional use of pasture and enable the associated extensive livestock farming. And analyzing only the operation 812 agroforestry systems seems to reduce the importance of existing support for this system under the CAP, given that in practice there are various supports for these systems, namely support for the system installation, support for system maintenance, and support for cork producing tree, and also indirect support such as support for number of livestock heads. Specifically, Operation 812 agroforestry systems. The idea of agroforestry systems depends on the stand density, as it is a prerequisite for applying to this measure, having 250 trees or 500 shrubs per hectare, a maximum and a minimum of 80 trees in the case of hardwoods and stone pines, and 150 trees per hectare in case of the other species. The objective of the measure is to support the establishment, regeneration, and renewal of extensive agroforestry system using species well adapted to the local conditions. Maintenance is ensured by means of a maintenance premium over 5 years. Three types of eligible agroforestry systems are supported. Sorry. Yes. Silvopastoral systems, walnut or chestnut orchard, and installation of implementation to promote the integration of agricultural areas and forestry production. To date, we have 3 calls for applications, and there are 45 approved projects for a total of 268 hectares of farm homes and 628 hectares of cork oaks, and an investment of 1.9 million investment support and 1.4 million of euros in maintenance premium. But the third call is not decided yet. Other support for agroforestry systems. We have the agro-environmental measure, extensive grazing, support for maintenance of agricultural agro-silvopastoral system under Montado. In 2019, a total of 4.2 million heads was granted under this measure. Its territorial distribution coincides completely with the distribution of the species in 6 national forest inventory. Sorry, I don't have time to translate this, but is a table where we can see 92% of the area receiving extensive grazing is concentrated exactly on the regions and the agricultural classes corresponding to cork oak and home oak plantations, Montado. The objective of Operation 811, afforestation of agricultural and non-agricultural land, ends up integrating the installation of agroforestry systems. In fact, the initial planting density is higher, but replanting, tining, and the final proposal of the forest management plans are aimed at the establishment of montados. Farmers apparently prefer this operation to develop projects in agroforestry systems, since maintenance support lasts 10 years, and in the case of agricultural land, it also accumulates with an income loss premium for the same period of time. Also, the investment support rate is 5% lower. Operation 815 improved the resilience and the environmental value of forests. In this operation, of total of 856 projects with an approved support amount of 69 million euros, 563 projects include 82,000 hectares of cork oak intervention, of which 27,000 hectares are newly installed, and 325 projects include 20,800 hectares of home oak intervention, of which 2,700 are newly installed. Agro-silvopastoral system, in particular cork oak and home oak plantation Montado, have been considered in Portugal within the scope of CAP support and have had several specific lines directed at them, as well as another more general support that was also being used by landowners. The ecological importance of their associated habitat, as well as their importance in the context of climate change, undoubtedly remains an important factor for the CAP 21-27 to continue to have the necessary support mechanisms for management and investment of these systems. Thank you. I hope my time is okay.
Thank you very much, Manuel. We will now move on to the last speaker before the discussion session, and we are moving to Greece. to hear Anastasia Pantera. Anastasia?
Hello.
Good morning. So Anastasia comes from the Agriculture University of Athens, from the Faculty of Crop Science in Greece.
Hello, I hope you can see my screen now.
Yes, we can see the screen.
Wrong screen. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so would like to congratulate the organizers for this excellent opportunity and share some common experiences and common wisdom concerning the implementation of agroforestry in the European countries, the European locations. So thank you, Joanna. I'm Anastasia Pantera, and I'm here actually representing the Hellenic Agroforestry Network. And I also chose to use this title, Experience of Not Implementing CAP Measure 8.2, not in Southern Europe, at least in Greece, because this is more or less what I can share with you today. And so the Hellenic Agroforestry Network is an NGO. We are a network of friends of nature and the rural landscape. And actually our cause is to promote agroforestry in a country where agroforestry is strongly related to its history. Agroforestry is tradition in Greece, similarly to many other countries, as I heard also from Giustino in Italy. So actually there are many different landscapes in Greece, very diverse landscapes, and this is actually mainly due to the landscape, the physiography of the country, which has a lot of mountains, and only in specific areas we have plains. So as you understand, people had to survive and had to survive taking the most out of their land. And agroforestry is exactly this. It's something that gives you the most out of your land. So in Greece, we have a large variety of plant species, hedgerows, woody, and of course, it's quite related to the cultural characteristics of the country. And because, as I said before, man had to survive, had to coexist with nature. So the main elements of our landscapes are the trees. The trees may be indigenous, cultivated, for timber, for fruits, and they characterize the environment actually, where humans lived and activate and were activated. So here you can see a whole variety of pictures from agroforestry systems in Greece. Here is from where I am right now in Britannia, which is a mountainous region, 1,000 meters of altitude. Here is another picture, and here you can see from the lowland. Here's from the northern part of the country, the southern part of the country, and the western part of the country. So you can see there's a whole diverse type of environments that actually compose agroforestry in Greece. So we were more or less, we are aware when we're still trying, and we will be still trying to implement and promote agroforestry in Greece. What we have done, we have actually organized several information events throughout the country where agroforestry was introduced as a traditional farming practice that needs to be preserved and enriched by modern ideas and that benefit both the farmers and the environment. I emphasize the preserve and enrich because it is a traditional, but there are also many, many possibilities for modern farming practices included in agroforestry. So what we have done, actually, we have participated in many TV shows, newspapers, excuse me. We have organized several stakeholders meetings. We have actually also organized an event within the major agricultural fair in Greece. We have produced many publications. We have visited policymakers in the ministry, in the agricultural ministry. We have sent many emails to all public sector agricultural offices. And we also have organized several meetings with agroforestry and agricultural officials, all this to promote agroforestry and actually also to promote the 8.2 measure in Greece. So we also had some help. I have to emphasize that all of this have been done actually on our own budget. I mean, our personal budget, because we are an NGO, so we don't have funds. We don't have any funds at all. So it's more or less based on our own contribution. So we also combined, we took some actually information from the project that we have been involved, the members have been involved in this project. So just a really short history of agroforestry in measuring Greece. Originally, it was included in the 2017 CAP as the 2.2 measure for agroforestry, but it was never implemented. Presently, it's included as the 8.2 measure as support for agroforestry systems, but it's also not implemented yet. And the news are not good again. Why? Well, because in the previous time, in the 2.2 measure, the problem was that the government, we had this disastrous forest fires in Greece in 2017. So the government had to spend the money to support these people and support all the rehabilitation and reforestation needs that appeared due to the forest fires. And I will explain more of what's the situation right now. So we need to adopt a forestry system because it supports the establishment and preservation of agroforestry systems. In Greece, it's composed of two actions: the establishment of trees in the fields and the preservation of the established systems for 5 years. Here, in short, just some short information because I don't have enough time. It's actually eligible for farmers, municipalities, farmers, associations, public forest. It covers the establishment, including fencing, management and tending for a maximum of 5 years with annual support per hectare. There are various forms of support based on the agroforestry type, and this is actually dependent on, for example, if you need something for pest management or per unit. It covers 80% of the eligible establishment cost and 100% of the annual maintenance cost. And it's actually it supports for less than 250 trees per hectare for the silvoarable systems, and about from 5 to 40 trees per hectare for the silvopastoral ones. And it depending actually for the physiographic conditions, which, as I said before, they're very diverse in Greece. And it covers a variety of trees ranging from forest to agricultural ones. So it is very promising forest, actually. So it is very important to be implemented because we need to preserve and conserve the soil. Actually, there are steep physiography in Greece, so we need to have forest trees there. Of course, we need to increase the farmers' income. We need to increase the financial security by the use of multiple types of trees and systems. Of course, we need to preserve tradition and history. They are so highly related to Greek history. Actually, one of the first mentionings of agroforestry systems in Greece was also in Odyssey, where Odysseus, as soon as he came back from when he came back to his island, he just admired his old agroforestry system. It's very well actually presented there. So we also need to preserve our biodiversity. This is being done by agroforestry. So what are the problems? Why haven't it been implemented so far? Because first of all, the farmers were very much afraid of the complexity of trees in their fields. Maybe there wasn't so much importance because of implementing this measure compared to other measures. The major problem we have in Greece is the understaffing of public services, and these are the ones that will be asked to implement the measure. We have administrative issues, and also we have the economic and contemporary constraints. What I mean by that is that, as I said before, the first time that the measure was not implemented was because of the financial need that the government had to cover the problem after the devastating fires in Peloponnesus. And presently, we had also a similar case. We have this financial crisis that you're all aware of it. And right now we have the coronavirus problem that will actually all of this pose financial constraints for the implementation of other issues. But the problem is that it's not a major important. It's not so much money. It's really a minor cost. It's only for 21 million for 7 years. And so it could be less. I mean, if the government decides to implement the measure, it can choose to provide less money or support less hectares. So, and it's very important that we start implementing it just to get an idea, just to get an example, just to get the practice of starting doing it anyway. So this is actually the main screen of our website of the Hellenic Agroforestry Network. And so I think I'm done with my 10 minutes. So thank you for your attention. Grazie per la vostra attenzione and ευχαριστώ for your prosophistas, and I'm quite open for any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anastasia, and thank you to all of the presenters. We were perfectly on time, so it is a pleasure to be moderating this session. And now we have a few minutes for the discussion. I have been taking some notes about the questions that were moving on the chat. And I know that there is, so first I will be trying to ask people to answer on those questions, on those two questions. And then if there is anyone that likes to make a comment or a question to one of the presenters, we will do that. So the first question was by Jerry to Justino. It is written on the chat, but I will read it because now you have lots of text after it. So Jerry says, you mentioned that the tree rotation length must be more than 20 years. Where did this restriction come from? It is not in the EU regulation. Justino, would you mind answering to Jerry about that?
Yes, I have just given my answer to Jerry in the chat. It's very simple. When we as association speak with the officer that in the different regions write the local application of the measure, they often say we find that in the regulation, and as Jerry suggested, the regulation don't say the limit of the rotation of the tree. But very often there is this kind of barrier, as Thomas has underlined. Clearly, the regulation coming from the EU are very, very complex, but very often we do our best to make them more and more complicated. And we, as EURAF, always fight to have a more simple, more flexible approach. We only say, give the farmer what they ask. If in my region they ask poplar, why I have to have a limitation? It's an agroforestry system. It's very ancient. It produces a timber that the local industry asks. Italy is not able to produce the timber, the poplar timber that we need. So why we put a limit to that? There is a partial answer. We have other measures to do that, but that measure are specific for the cultivation of poplar, for example, and we will produce a plantation that is not an agroforestry system. Is a specialized. It's a crop. It's a crop that lasts for 10 years, but you spread, you spray it, you use the labor, you do everything you do in a specialized. So it's very difficult to introduce the concept that agroforestry is not forest. This is a strong limit of actual regulation. Is something that is across, and as we are all specialists, the foresters say it's not forestry, the farmer, the agricultural specialists say it's not agriculture, but it's the reason why we are here. We have to introduce this very complex idea that there is a third way, that is the agroforestry way.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Justino. I think it was very clear and a very nice description of the situation and of one of the important reasons why we are here in this webinar. And then I saw that Manuel Loureiro already answered to Rosa, but I will just read the question and I will ask Manuel to answer it so that everyone could understand the answer. The question was made by Rosa Mosquera, and it says, when mixing chestnuts for forest and fruit production, do you select different varieties to be planted? If so, how do you fulfill the requisites of the EU with regards to the 50% of forest tree use? Has a tree canopy? This is very important because the tree density is very different when you aim for fruit and for timber uses. So it's a very specific question on one of the systems that we have. Manuel, could you answer to everyone, please?
Okay, let me try. The question is, in Portugal, any forest project need to have a forest management plan. And this forest management plan need to add the objective of the plantation. And with chestnuts, it's possible to have two objectives of the process. So we can produce for wood and fruit, but and they are special kind of things you need to do it. So if it's defined with a mixed objective, you need to have a tank with I think it's 3 meters high, and you just could enxertar, não me recordo do nome.
Grafting.
Grafting after that. So the objective must be defined, and the operations, the forestry operations, you need to do it to grade these two objectives need to be explained on this forest management plan. I think I explained. Sorry.
Thank you very much. So now I'd like to ask the rest of the participants if they want to make any questions, any comments. We still have a few minutes before moving on to the presentations from the US. You can make the presentation, you can make any comment or any question if you unmute your mic, or you can use the question and answer option provided by Zoom, one of the buttons that you have below.
Joanna, may I make a question that is written in the chat? It's just about, it's about if any of the panelists see the bioeconomy concept as a good way to convince farmers and policymakers to move forward agroforestry. I mean, by providing alternative uses of the woody perennial component, like, for example, cosmetics, firewood, etc. Is that an opportunity for the rural development programs to move agroforestry forward, this bioeconomy concept associated to the tree EURAF component? Thank you.
So I think the question was not specific for any one of the presenters. Does anyone want to answer to Rosa, to make a comment on the issue of bioeconomy? From my point of view, yes, it is very relevant, of course. If you increase the number of productions that you can take from one agroforestry stands, of course, it will make a huge impact in the sustainability, not only from an ecological point of view, but also from an economic and social point of view. But I would prefer to hear the comments from the other panelists or other participants. Does anyone want to comment on that?
A short comment. Clearly, I agree with you, Joanna, and well-posed question, Rosa. Certainly, if we are able to extract from the timber, from the wood, from the leaves, from the bark, bioproducts, clearly we improve the competitivity of our trees. We have a specific experience. I have mentioned it before, an operative group. In this case, there is an attention to the production of biochar, charcoal, and this could be a way. And as we know, you can put the charcoal in the soil, and it's an extraordinary way to take the carbon dioxide and put it for a very long time in the soil, fighting against the climate change, or you can use it for many processes that came after the processing. And during that, you produce a renewable energy. So this is, in my idea, a very good example.
Yes, and so many others. So we have so many good examples that we need to provide to farmers and to the local authorities and to the European authorities. We have so good science providing us information, and so much nice examples about the potential of agroforestry. And thank you, all of you, for being here today to promoting it. So we have, I don't know if it's a comment or a question from Ian before we move on to the last presentation. So you can read it on the chat, but I'll read it. Farmers will only grow trees if there is a if there is a guarantee of economic return. We need to link support for trees establishment with the support for development of local rural industries. For example, in the UK, a company was established to produce plywood from poplar trees, with a company contracted farmers to grow poplar trees in agroforestry plantations. Also, apple trees were grown in an arable agroforestry systems for the production of apple juice. So another good example of the high number of systems and of the variety that agroforestry systems provide, and that's very relevant, picking up on what Jose Ramon said about the differences in Spain, about the climate and about the growing conditions. Agroforestry does has this large potential of being adapted to very different conditions. So if a very Rosa was saying, Rosa, do you have any additional questions? Just before moving on, you were writing something.
No, was a comment okay, for Justine about the biochar and inclusion in the IPCC justification of the Japan. That was the first country in doing that, and that would be very relevant from now, and probably for the use of agroforestry goodie component. Thank you.
Thank you. And the last one from Jerry Lawson to Manuel. Olive trees and vines are classified as permanent crops in CAP. I hear that some stone pines are for Pinus pinea, is also a permanent crop in Portugal because of its nuts production. Is this true? I could answer, but the question is made for Manuel, so let's take the advantage that we have someone from the ministry here to answer. Manuel.
And because I could have the help of Giovanna if I'm mistaken. No. Plantation of Pinus pinea are forest areas. Cork is agriculture. Is defined on the next one of the European trade. But Pinus pinea is a forest plantation. So it's a forest area. I don't know if is that.
Yeah, it's a forest. I can complement. It's a forest area where you do the more or less the same type of techniques and the more or less the same type of technical actions that you define in the forest management plan, similar to the ones that Manuel already described for the chestnut. It's a similar situation, so you can graft the trees, and because you are if you're aiming for fruit or for timber production, you define the silvicultural techniques and you make them suitable either for fruit or for timber production. I hope that was clear. So because we are, yes, thank you.
Thank you, Joanna.
Because we are very nicely on schedule, we will move to the last presentation. Unfortunately, like you know, unfortunately, we will not have the last presentation that was planned by India, but we will now move on for the presentation on policies to support agroforestry in North America. John, are you there? Hello.
Hello, Joanna.
Hello, and thank you very much for joining us. I am sure that it's not lunchtime for you.
Oh, yes. It's so not even breakfast. It's not even breakfast time.
Yes. So because I'm the one speaking to you, but for sure I can say in the name of the organization and by the name of EURAF, thank you very much for being here with us at this time. So John, it's from the Forest Management Extension Specialist from Virginia Tech, and he will give us an insight of the policies to support agroforestry in North America.
Yes, thank you, Joanna, for the introduction, and thank you for the opportunity to be with you today to speak about policies to support agroforestry in North America. And let me open my slides here. And I guess since I only have a short amount of time with you today, I will begin with my take-home message, which is that North American agroforestry policy is characterized by one, diversity, and what we call devolution in the policy arena, and also a historical dearth of programs and comprehensive study regarding the suite or the universe of agroforestry policies across the continent, and of course a very sizable continent with numerous countries, but we know that there is incremental progress underway. And so when I say diversity, we nearly have 50 countries and territories that comprise North America. And of course, our climates range from tropical, semi-tropical, temperate, all the way to Arctic. That includes countries such as Panama to Greenland to Sabah and Mexico. And when I mentioned devolution, this is a common trend across the continent, which is that our federal governance tends to define the intent, and this is very relevant to agroforestry policy, but then pushes the enactment down to regional governance. So the intent is broad. Typically, the language includes emphasis on potential opportunities associated with integrating trees, crops, and livestock. But then the federal government often steps out of the way and allows for voluntary enactment of that particular intent through regional policy. And I don't claim to be an expert in terms of the full suite of policies across the continent, but I do have some information I'd like to share with respect to Canada, Mexico, and the United States, which altogether include 92 states and provinces and territories. I'll begin with Canada. Canada has supported agroforestry policies in name, at least, at the federal level since 1901. So have been recognizing the benefits of trees in agricultural systems for well over a century. And during that time, the government has been involved in supporting nearly 1,800 projects, primarily under the agricultural policy framework, which is kind of the large infrastructure that defines, again, primarily the intent across Canada with respect to agricultural policy and particular practices and implementation. And so, yes, indeed, the implementation is largely pushed to provinces. There is an overarching institute organization in Canada known as Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, and that is the only institution in the country with an agroforestry mandate. So that is explicit, and through that mandate, several research centers were established. However, my understanding is that in recent years, some of those centers have gone away. So there was some investment and some activity for several decades, but some of those centers are no longer with us. One good example is of work in Canada would be related to the Agricultural Greenhouse Gases Program, which funded agroforestry research and outreach across the country. And that entailed involvement of universities, some governmental and non-governmental organizations. And here we can see a research site at the University of Guelph, which was a product of that particular program and some of that support. Moving to Mexico, and this example is probably one of the more recent ones in terms of kind of a large-scale federal level program rolling out in terms of supporting the integration of trees into agriculture. The program is known as Sembrado Vida, Sowing Life, and that was established in 2019. And the goal of that program focused on about 570,000 hectares of tree planting in agricultural space in 8 southern and southeast states and 14 municipalities, specifically in the state of Durango. And much of this is focused on improving rural income and food resiliency in some of the most impoverished areas in the country. And the focus on timber and fruit tree plantings was explicit in the policy. Also an objective to create 200,000 jobs in what they call milpas systems, which are kind of the traditional agricultural configurations in that part of North America. And the funding related to the program was $1.2 million US. Now in 2019, the goal was to plant 575 million trees. That fell short. The projections or estimates are currently that only 60 million trees have been planted, but the program does remain in place and is active, so continues to work to establish agroforestry systems across the country, or at least specifically in those areas targeted. And a heavy reliance on integrating traditional rural practices, so those that are polyculture and blended systems, using that kind of traditional knowledge as a leverage point to find opportunities for tree planting through the particular program. Now, I'm most familiar, of course, with the United States, and so can provide a few more examples. And first, speaking historically, one of the best examples of historical agroforestry policy in the United States would be the Prairie States Forestry Project, which was established following the Dust Bowl disaster in the early 1930s. A great deal of drought and lots of problems with wind erosion, soil, and loss of ag land. And the focus was on windbreaks, and that project ran from 1935 to 1942 with heavy investment from the federal government. All told, when the project was completed, there were over 30,000 windbreaks that were planted that included 220 million trees, and much of that infrastructure remains today. However, we have seen declines in some of that kind of legacy agroforestry practice due to clearing. But after all was said and done, there was 48,000 square kilometers of windbreaks planted primarily in the middle part of the country. Now, fast forwarding a little bit to 1995, at that time, 20 of the 50 states had some form of agroforestry legislation on the books, so to speak. 9 had direct legislation specifically related to cost share, which would assist landowners in terms of implementing agroforestry practices by reducing the costs, the expenditures that were required to establish those particular practices on their land. There were 11 with indirect legislation, and that included tax incentives and cost share as well. So there were 9 that were more forward-leaning in terms of engaging landowners and farmers with their practices, and others were more passive in that those programs existed, but there was not active support for promoting. And 18 of those states did provide specific incentives. But interesting is that New York and Washington, with indirect legislation, actually enforced regulations. So if you took advantage of those programs in terms of establishing trees and reducing your costs, then there was some regulation involved with ensuring that you maintained that green infrastructure, that tree infrastructure on the farm. And in 1990, this is an important landmark period in terms of kind of national, federal level policy or support related to agroforestry. Our 1990 Farm Bill authorized the United States Department of Agriculture National Agroforestry Center, which exists today and has provided quite a bit of support, not only to institutions and organizations, but also to landowners by way of their library of information and newsletters that share technical information. And a key product related to the National Agroforestry Center, which has done quite a bit in the last decade in terms of drawing attention to agroforestry at the federal level, and also in a devolved sense down to the states, is the Agroforestry Strategic Framework. And 2 of these have been released by our National Agroforestry Center, and they've defined and laid out funding strategies through existing programs that have targeted farmers and forest landowners in terms of cost share, but might not have specifically articulated agroforestry as a qualifying practice. But these strategic frameworks laid out strategies to integrate agroforestry into the language of programs such as the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, otherwise known as EQIP, and our longstanding Conservation Stewardship Program, CSP and CRP, and our Regional Conservation Partnership Programs, which are coordinated by the Department of Ag's Natural Resources Conservation Service. So that's what NRCS stands for. And so that's an agency that really works across our ag and forest lands to conserve some of the ecosystem services that are provided by those lands, and to help protect water quality, habitat, and so on and so forth. And key in the strategic framework is interagency collaboration. So really looking at ways not to kind of create or carve out agroforestry as its own entity, but ways to kind of leverage the existing infrastructure, policy infrastructure, to bring agroforestry into the language and into the consciousness and into some of the programs that exist. And that then, of course, means some financial support potentially for landowners who want to implement practices. So indeed, helping landowners achieve their natural resources goals is an important part of these strategic frameworks. And multiple objectives is really also something that underpins the approach. So we're talking water, air, but also agricultural production, and increasing other types of benefits from our farming and forest lands. Now, I mentioned the Farm Bill earlier. This is our kind of overarching large policy body wherein support for agriculture and forestry in the larger sense is defined. And these bills come along every 4 or 5 years or so. They really are an arduous process for our legislators at the federal level. So there's lots of back and forth and wrangling. But ultimately, you know, with fingers crossed, they do get passed. And you can see the sequence here. In 2002, agroforestry was included in the cost share program. So, you know, thinking back to the 1990 Farm Bill with the National Agroforestry Center being defined, coming on 2002, we start to see language more readily included in our farm bills. And so in 2002, the agroforestry as a practice was included in cost share programs administered by NRCS. 2008, there was a biomass crop assistance program, which had an agroforestry angle to it. So we're starting to see some incremental progress in terms of inclusion of agroforestry in the Farm Bill. And then 2014, landmark in terms of authorizing NRCS really to work specifically on agroforestry projects. So 2002 was just, okay, it's included in cost share programs, but 2014, now we're looking at a situation where agroforestry is specific in terms of the work that NRCS can do. And the federal program was defined, but again, here we see this devolution where the individual states must approve. And some states have great accomplishments, like Minnesota with their living fences and Pennsylvania with their riparian buffers. But other states have just ignored, say, you know, the opportunity to include agroforestry specifically in their standards for the kind of cost share and incentive programs. The 2018 Farm Bill, that reauthorized and expanded NRCS programs that support agroforestry, but you know, there's still some gaps. I think that the future farm bills, we can look at insurance. That's a really important component that I believe is missing. There's not a lot of crop insurance for farmers that, you know, have perennial systems that they're managing. So, you know, some of that kind of time and risk that is taken on by producers is not necessarily supported through insurance programs, and insurance programs are a big part of Farm Bill. Now, riparian buffers is a good example of kind of, it's really the bread and butter, so to speak, of our cost share programs. It has a long history of support, implementation, and USDA and RCS has been a big part of that. They not only share the cost of installing, but also the cost of renting land where those buffers are installed. However, there is a retention issue because those incentives typically are on a 3 to maximum 15-year time frame. So after 15 years, you're no longer receiving rental payments for your buffers, and many farmers decide that it's better to remove that perennial infrastructure and can go back to annual farming in some of those areas because they're no longer receiving the benefits. However, there are other governmental and non-governmental organizations that are working to take a different angle, something more in terms of from an agroforestry angle or sense, integrating some of those production crops into the buffer space, so that it's not just tree infrastructure, but we're also talking about non-timber forest products as well. And it's akin to windbreak policy, with thousands of square kilometers that have been planted out through the support that has this retention legacy issue. Several states mandate buffers on farms, though, in the United States, for example, Vermont. So buffers are required. And so the question is, what is the species components in those buffers, and do we have an agroforestry system at play? But there are other states that are considering this mandatory buffer law as well, but those have not been enacted. Now, Pennsylvania has as a state, is one of the best examples in terms of buffer implementation, using policy at the federal and state level to support landowners in implementation. And buffers are central to their work, but silvopasture and other strategies are also supported. So Pennsylvania has made a great deal of progress in terms of working with policy angles in a creative way to increase the use of agroforestry. And so they have a big focus on water quality because of the Chesapeake Bay. Pennsylvania has the largest portion of the watershed. And this is the third largest estuary in the world. And it's, kind of a key icon on the eastern part of the United States, and has suffered from water quality issues related to upland uses, primarily ag runoff. Pennsylvania has been able to work with the heavily subsidized federal cost share programs to increase implementation. And they're focusing on highly erodible lands. And they do have harvesting, so there is some management that can be allowed under certain circumstances. So that does lend itself to implementation of agroforestry and management of those practices in that area. And they're working also on the market side too, with respect to demand for products associated with those systems. Silvopasture is increasingly popular in the United States, and numerous states have now include cost share standards. So again, the federal government would define the intent, but the states then have the opportunity to include, and this has increased in terms of silvopasture through Code 381. And so this is addressing landowner costs, but also focusing on a whole suite of benefits associated with the use of silvopasture. And owners through this program receive planning, operation, and maintenance assistance through that cost reduction, but also engagement with agents that are trained in those practices and can assist them. And Virginia has examples of this as well, and so do many other states. So that is increasing in terms of the state emphasis on agroforestry. Carbon and soil legislation is also something that's a growing opportunity, looking at paying for greenhouse gas reductions on farms and ranches. So, the use of agroforestry in a subsidized sense, focused specifically on carbon sequestration and soil health. And there are some research projects underway at North Carolina State and Yale universities that are looking at the policies and how they might align with, kind of the philosophy of agroforestry and the extent to which, say, maybe the community can work to integrate agroforestry into the consciousness and use of some of those supporting systems. And, that includes examining some state carbon policies as well. But Washington is a great example. They have just passed legislation focused on carbon and soil, and that includes explicit language related to use of agroforestry as a strategy to achieve some of those goals. And then lastly, property tax. Most land in the U.S. is privately owned. So you think about how to kind of nudge private decision-making, and tax incentives is certainly one way to do that and can encourage the use of agroforestry. And so timber and fiber were some of the most commonly cited in laws and regulations. And, in 2014, there were about 210 million acres enrolled in some form of property tax program associated with land use, and rural land uses specific to forestry and agriculture do have some tax incentives if you define your land or your operation in that regard. So you have to kind of register your operation, but that can lead to some tax incentives. However, one of the big problems we're running into is that there's a forestal designation and an agricultural designation. And when we think about agroforestry, it is essentially blending of those two systems. And I can tell you from my state that the county tax codes, so we're not talking state level, actually going down the county level, do not allow for that blending. So it's a big question mark. So a livestock producer says, I want to plant trees and, claim this as a forestal designation. And I say, well, that can't happen. But it can't be agricultural either. So they're kind of out of luck in both ends. So the current strategy is to navigate this policy on the basis of applicability and to really work to kind of blend the timber and agronomic cropping to qualify as agriculture and forestal in its operations so that there's space for the agroforestry producer. So that does it for me. I'd like to thank everyone again for your time and appreciate the invitation. In North America, there is a historical precedent. It's been a little bit incremental. We have had some kind of punctuated activities, thinking back to the Prairie States Forestry Act and now what we see in Mexico. And large federal programs have come and some have gone, most always. It'd be nice to see something a little bit more consistent. We'll continue to work to make the case in terms of the next farm bill. But we know that progress is happening and, transactional policies, I believe, would be good if there's some overarching framework, but we will see how that plays out in the future. So thank you.
Thank you very much, John, for your nice presentation and a good overview of North America. We have already some questions for you. They are written on the chat. The first one is from Ulrich. Hi, John, nice presentation. I would like to know more about the interaction of federal and state level in the US regarding agroforestry policies. Do they complement or compete? I think this is very important in relation to some of the presentations that we heard, not only from Spain, but also from other northern countries in session number 1. What can you tell us?
I would say both. I believe that as we've seen incremental steps made in terms of recognizing agroforestry in the Farm Bill at the federal level, and I'm speaking, of course, specific to the United States, but that recognition and that kind of integration of agroforestry into some of the existing policy structure has been complementary to particular state level activity regarding the promotion and support of agroforestry implementation. However, it is also a kind of devolved system where that is the intent, and most of our land use policies then go to the state for actual transaction or implementation. And in terms of competition, that Farm Bill is rooted primarily in our existing large-scale industrial agricultural framework, meaning that there's a significant lobby, and much of what is pushed forward in the Farm Bill is to support some of that industrial ag. So while we see agroforestry implemented or included, I should say, in terms of the particular cost share programs and other types of initiatives that are defined in the Farm Bill, it's dominated by a more kind of monoculture framework associated with most of our agriculture in the middle part of the country. And so that doesn't always lend itself well to the perennial producer. And that's where like crop insurance comes in. I mentioned that those insurance programs are primarily set up to support our corn and soybean farmers, for instance, on what they're dealing with on an annual basis, as opposed to opportunities for perennial cropping systems and the insurance programs that might deal with that, which is kind of on a different time scale. So it's great to see that that's integrated, and in terms of the state and federal tension, I think by nature of that definition, there are certainly big ag states in the United States that are very much involved with the kind of monoculture systems, monocropping systems, and they depend heavily upon that. And so we might not see agroforestry playing out at the state level in that regard, but I think that it has to do with demand. And in the eastern United States and in the western United States, I think we see a little bit more demand for agroforestry, and some of the states responding, in a voluntary sense once it's defined at the federal level.
Thank you very much. Demand, one large keyword. And after this question from Ulrich, we have, I think it's more of a comment by Rosa. Rosa, do you like to comment on the technical assistance, or do you prefer me to read it?
I was really well. Hello, John. How are you? It has been a long time since we did not see each other. And I just want to ask him, because in Europe there are now a big extension about innovation and the promotion of extension services of one of the horizontal measures to be taken by the next CAP. And I was in several meetings, and I always speak about the technical assistance that is developed in Virginia, where researchers and coming from university setters are really very well connected with farmers. So I was asking myself, what is the key the aspects that could help European Union to move forward to this better integrated assistance? That is one question. Another question is about what do you think that the use of agroforestry labels to identify the food products coming from agroforestry can be seen by consumers in the USA? Thank you.
Well, yes. Good to see you, Rosa. It has been some time, and thanks for the question. The first thing that kind of came to mind, and you mentioned university researchers engaged with producers, and the United States in particular, but Canada also, and to some extent Mexico, but have an extension service tied to our universities, which is really the kind of conduit between researchers and our farmers, our landowners, land managers, and I'm very much involved in that. So, I'm situated at the university, but also I have a mandate to engage and work with producers. So, it's a matter of those individuals that are involved with agroforestry and making that part of the conversation. But the infrastructure is there, the human infrastructure is there to engage, and so some of what we focus on is trying to work with our extension community to make agroforestry more commonplace in terms of their lexicon, or what they're communicating to producers as those individuals are asking questions. And so I think that's a really important kind of connection between the university world and the production world. I think that in terms of branding, we have a problem still, though, despite the fact we have this nice system of extension between the university and producers through this extension service. We also have a problem with kind of what we might say interdisciplinary work, because our universities and our policy systems are very much structured in kind of confined, defined spaces. And so, for instance, some of my colleagues on the agricultural side, we're not even in the same college. So our administration is completely different. And, I like to go around and often say that, we talk quite a bit about, interdisciplinarity at the university or even within our agencies. And, we should be more collaborative and these types of things. But we really have a hard time getting around that in an administrative sense or doing that. But agroforestry really has provided a framework for what I call is like a teamwork approach. And, so if we can continue to build that branding and consciousness, I think, at least here in the United States, I see greater opportunities for interdisciplinary work. And I think that can help in terms of spreading the word and leverage. Again, it's interesting because we have this great deal of infrastructure in place. It's, from a political angle, from kind of educational angle, and agroforestry is not something that we need to kind of birth as its own entity. It's in my opinion, it's like it needs to be integrated. And so we're working on that integration to make it more commonplace. And I think that will strengthen our collaboration across disciplines and our interagency collaboration. If you look back to what I noted with respect to the strategic framework released by the Department of Agriculture's National Agroforestry Center, one of the key points is interagency collaboration. It's really what it's going to take. And so continuing to define that kind of collaborative approach at the university among our agencies and using agroforestry, as that kind of pedestal to accomplish that, I think is the progress that we're making. We're not there yet by any means, but that continues.
Thank you very much for your comments. I see that Pierluigi was trying to make one question for Victor Nagy and a comment on agroforestry labels. Pierluigi, can you unmute your mic? Or do you prefer me to read it? I can read it. It was a question for Victor Nagy. If using fruit trees, the system can attract wild animals with damage to trees or crops. I don't know if Victor is still with us and if he wants to unmute his mic.
Hello to everyone. Can you see me?
Yes.
No, you can hear me, but
now we can see you.
No. The question for Victor Nagy was an old one. Actually, it was my mistake, because my experience was that in agroforestry system with trees producing edible fruit for wild animals, oaks producing acorns. This area can be very attractive for wild animals, and this can make many damage to the crops. So we have to take care of the interaction between wild animals and trees producing edible fruit. This is just a consideration. Maybe there are specific experiences from the different people attending the meeting. And that's related to the question made by Rosa concerning the agroforestry labels for food production, that in my opinion can be more attractive for the consumer, because in my experience most of the advertisement concerning natural food production is always associated to movies and image with trees in the foreground. So for sure, the agroforestry label can be more attractive for natural food production and selling.
Thank you. Victor, I don't know if you want to make a last comment before we finish with conclusions and recommendations.
I can answer it shortly, because maybe if I can share my screen just for a second. Shared screen.
Yes, now we can see it.
Okay, the answer for the question is over here, what I'm indicating. Yes, the wild animals are causing problems in the agroforestry system, and yes, the fruit species and their the actual fruits will be very attractive for the wild animals, but we made into the call for tender such a requirement that the farmer or the forest owner have to make mechanical or physical protection for the system as an additional requirement. So maybe it's not 100% protection against wild animals, but we believe that it's kind of a good solution to protect the whole system by physical, maybe with fences, like and so that is the answer for the question.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So we had a question that related us to the session number 1 that was moderated by Rosa. So I think it's time. It was a good way to see that the 2 sessions were related to each other and that many questions are common to northern and southern countries. So I think we'll move on to conclusions and recommendations. Giovanna.
Yes, thank you very much, Joanna. So we are a little bit late, but it's okay. We almost on time, so we are very happy. So I would ask to draw up some conclusions and recommendations from Maria Rosa and also from Joanna for the first session and the second session. So please, Maria Rosa, if you would like to try to summarize, and then maybe for Joanna after.
Thank you very much. The first conclusion is that this was a completely success session, as we have over 100 people involved from the different channels that were used to spread this event. So congratulations for the organizers. As a conclusion, I'm trying to make a wrap up, which is not easy. So probably I forget some of the important key points, but I try to make the point in a global way. I can summarize it as a conclusion. Agroforestry is a sustainable land use that should be applied in the different land uses of the European member states. Agroforestry in the current CAP is not largely used by farmers in spite of the strong efforts of the policymakers to move it forward. Main reasons behind are the loss of eligibility of agricultural lands when Measure 8.2 is implemented. Other reasons were, however, solved in the Omnibus regulation, mostly related with the renewal and improvement of already existing agroforestry systems like the DEGESA, which was quite and highly relevant for the countries of the south of Europe. Currently, there are no data about agroforestry information, but the Commission is looking forward for a net increase of agroforestry 8.2 measure implementation. Let's see what happens. With regard to the summary of what has been shown by most of the rural development, the responsibles of the rural development programs, we can say that most of them are dealing with the fact that agroforestry is a multi-purpose land use system where agriculture and goodie components are mixed and can end up as agricultural or as a forest land. And this makes very complicated the life of policymakers, which at the end complicates the life of farmers. This is seen as a difficult task for policymakers, and several examples were provided by the different presenters. The new CAP is seen as an opportunity to overcome the eligibility challenges because it will be based more on results payment than in land use systems. Many concerns have been described by the different speakers about which the lack of knowledge was highlighted by several of them. But also the lack of local research showing the economic benefits of agroforestry compared with the current land use. This is in line with the challenges and innovations requested by the over 1,500 stakeholders from all over Europe that were working in Affinet, which I miss from a bit from this session, the point of view of the farmers, which says that they have challenges that are dealing with technical aspects, economic aspects, including bioeconomy and an alternative economic evaluation of agroforestry systems and conventional farming systems, and even organic farming systems, but also challenges related with education, as we saw before with John, as they have in the USA, and of course policy challenges. As recommendations, CAP strategic plans for the next CAP are seen as an opportunity to overcome the eligibility challenge associated to the agroforestry implementation, but also to use high amount of resources associated to the innovation promotion that will be a unique opportunity to develop local research projects acting as agroforestry demonstration fields that within the next CAP will be allowed to establish international networking. All of you know about the operational groups in the current CAP. They were not able to collaborate, the operational group between different countries. That will be pursued and favored in the forthcoming CAP. Well, I personally think and I think this is a feeling that all EURAF has, that for the forthcoming CAP, it will be very important that EURAF national delegates contribute to the movement of agroforestry within both the 8.2 measure, but also within the eco schemes. In Galicia, we are developing an eco scheme on agroforestry. And just to end up with our presenter from the United States, a teamwork approach is needed, integrating all the stakeholders to push agroforestry forward. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much, Maria Rosa. Joanna, would you like to summarize a bit your second session?
I think Rosa already did a very nice job in summarizing what was part of what was said and part of the important aspects that join us here today. I'll just like to add some 3 topics. First, the importance of recognizing that measure 8.2 should not be the one exclusively pointed out by us in order to promote and to increase the establishment of agroforestry systems. I think we saw that in some of the presentations of the southern countries, that there are other measures that could support agroforestry systems. One other key aspect was that several times this was even pointed out by Thomas, several times the national or the regional rules are more restrictive than the EU rules. So this really is something to work on. What can we do? Of course, EURAF has a crucial role in lobbying for agroforestry in Europe, but this also means that national delegates, national associations have a crucial role in speaking with the regions, in speaking with the national governments, because we really don't want to be strict, limited to measure 8.2. We really want to increase the impact of agroforestry, to increase the uptake of this production system. So we really need to be ambitious. So it's really important for us to be ambitious, not only in the EU, but also at the national levels. So, and I think Rosa also summed up quite nicely what she said regarding the 2 sessions. Thank you very much. That's all from my side.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't know if Patrick, maybe would you like to say something?
I'd just like to thank the 2 facilitators, Rosa and Joanna, for having done such an excellent job in marshalling their speakers and in summarizing the key points that came out. I'd also like, on behalf of the whole of EURAF, to thank all of the speakers, especially those who had to get up long before breakfast, John, for having made the time to participate in this event and to share their wisdom. I'd like to leave us all with a hope that by the time spring comes around again in May, we may finally be allowed to meet in person again. But until then, I wish you Godspeed and look forward to seeing you tomorrow.
Okay, thank you very much, Patrick. Now I think that we can close this webinar today, and as Patrick reminded, it's important to join also tomorrow. With the focus of tomorrow will be the future agroforestry policies. So I'm excited to hear, to listen all the presentation also for tomorrow. Okay, so bye-bye. Thank you very much to all of you. It was really interesting. Bye-bye. Have a nice lunch or breakfast.
Everyone, have a great afternoon.
Bye-bye.
Good afternoon. Bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.